Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about what we can do with our equipment to maintain shoulder health while benching heavy. Because, the bench press is one of those exercises that over time can cause shoulder issues. That's known in powerlifting, it's known everywhere. And not just the bench press, but a lot of various heavy chest presses, even weighted dips and things can aggravate, irritate, and damage shoulders over time if we're not careful. And a lot of people will try to say stuff like squats and deadlifts do that, but in my experience, the injury rates, if those are done correctly, actually tend to be much, much lower. And as far as inflammation and things go, usually if you're having knee problems on the squat, for example, there's something wrong with the way you're performing the squat, or you have a muscle imbalance, right? It's not the exercise. So let's come over and talk a little bit about benching, and you guys will see in the background just me doing a few ramp ups to different maxes. I have them rotated through, so some of the weights are lighter. A little bit of my rep work and stuff thrown in. And one of the things you guys notice is that I use the conjugate method for all my heavy benching, which means you see me changing the bars all the time. And you'll notice all of these are wider grip. And for me, wide grip, if I'm not careful, can aggravate my shoulders. This is something I have to pay attention to as I get older, and this is stuff I've had to experiment with and learn here in real time. And a lot of you out there, if you've been following me a while, have been watching my own journey with that. You've watched my struggles with that. You watched me do different things and complain about my shoulders and so on and so forth. But I've reached a point to where I don't have any shoulder inflammation. I don't have any shoulder pain. I don't have any issues, and my bench is going back up. And a lot of that has to do with being very careful in our exercise selection for rep work. And it has to do with me rotating the heavy lifts all the time. In other words, you'll see me use different bars. I only use 2 different bars in this particular clip. Use a straight bar, and you see me using a buffalo bar. And the buffalo bar, for some people, if your shoulders are fragile, might irritate them. But if it's used sparingly, it can help build a range of motion and mobility. And it can test you at the bottom the most because it adds an extra inch or 2 to the range of motion, a couple inches. Mine, it adds at least 2 inches to my range of motion, forces you to get deeper. But you can pay attention to those things and say, okay, well, maybe I'm only going to do that really for heavy work. But you'll see me use different bands, different chains, different forms of contrast weight, or known as accommodation. Rotate through those things. Rotate through the different bars. I have a football bar. Right, I have a football bar also, which again puts your wrists and your elbows and shoulders into a neutral position because you have a hammer grip. Changes the stress on the shoulder. And so when we're doing our heavy work, if we're continually changing the stress on the shoulder, we tend to have a much, much lower amount of inflammation. We're also at a much lower risk of overuse injuries. So that's one of the things that I do. Rotate the bars. Rotate the contrast weight. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have all that. Well, maybe you should get all that. I mean, that's the thing that I would say to people out there when you're selecting a gym. When you're selecting a gym, that's the first sort of thing you need to be looking for. Not what machines the gym has. You need to be looking at what barbells the gym has. Do they have chains? Do you have a way for you to hook your own bands up if you bring your own bands? Right? Right? That is the case. You need to be looking at those things when you're selecting a gym. Instead of looking over at all the machines and saying, oh, wow, they have 37 different machines. Well, it's not necessarily going to save your shoulders. Look at what they have for strength training equipment. Then we could talk about what we do for rep work. If you have different exercises that aggravate your shoulders, you can't do rep work for those. In my case, close grip doesn't. Close grip doesn't aggravate my shoulders, so I do all my rep work close grip. I don't do reps with the wider grip stuff. And the same thing, we can rotate through different bars. We can rotate through different bars to again prevent overuse injury even for your volume training. Right? That's something that we have as an option. We also need to avoid exercises that aggravate our shoulders. For me, chin-ups and pull-ups. What? Yeah, I'm a big fan of the chin up and pull up. I quit doing them. I've quit doing them. And a lot of people are like, well, why? Didn't you do this experiment last year where you were doing 100 chins a day? Yeah, I did. But you know what? It started to make my shoulders hurt. And I've reached a point to realize my own personal mobility, my shoulders are not built to extend all the way locked out overhead. They're not. I've tested my mobility over and over and over. I've been doing tons of mobility work, and I've found the points in my joint where what most people would consider to be a proper true lockout in an overhead press, just short of that, I actually seem to have bone in the way. In my case, it creates pain. So when I do all those heavy chins, and you guys have seen me do dead hang chins with 100 pounds from a dead hang, it aggravates my shoulders. There's no point in it. The chin up doesn't bring anything to the table I don't get from rows and curls and other stuff. So why aggravate your shoulders? So if you have an exercise that bothers your shoulders, take it out. You also don't see me really low bar squatting either. Why? It can aggravate shoulders. Pay attention to what you do with squatting. And before people jump in and say, oh, well, low bar lets you lift more. Really? There's plenty of world record holders who squat with the bar on their traps. Are they doing it wrong? Would those same people lift more if they put it down on their back and aggravated their shoulders? So they would break their own world records if they switched to that, is what you're saying. That's going to be a hard sell for me. And that's the question I would ask people too. If the low bar squat aggravates your shoulders at all, why do it? Learn to get strong at the high bar. And if you're not trying to set world records, does it really matter that you personally seem to squat 10 pounds more with a low bar than a high bar? You think that 10 pounds is going to make or break you at a powerlifting meet? Really? By that, you really think so? Maybe, but it's unlikely. And I almost promise you it's because you haven't learned how to squat with the bar set higher yet. Maybe you're using a different foot position and you don't realize it. So these are the things that we need to pay attention to. Exercises that bother your shoulders or irritate them probably shouldn't be done. Pay attention to your shoulder health. Pay attention to all your other exercises. This is how we keep our shoulders healthy. Make sure your rear delts are strong. So you guys see me doing more and more face pulls. Do face pulls. Do band pull aparts. Obviously rowing. Rowing's a big one. Depending on how you row, if you know how to row correctly. Even various forms of rows. Rowing will help the rear delts obviously tremendously. Should always be your foundation, but stuff like face pulls, band pull aparts. Maintain your shoulder health. Right? And in my case, that means a lot of cutting certain exercises out that I don't necessarily need. They don't benefit me. And it's ironic because a couple of them, I have strength standards on for people. But I've surpassed those strength standards by a long time ago. And some of them by a significant margin. So I don't care. Focus on my other lifts. But that's what we have to look at. You have to look at what serves you. Another big one, wrist wraps. I see some guys who are very resistant to use the wrist wraps. It's not like they're cheating. Okay, it's not like they let you lift more weight, unlike knee wraps, elbow wraps. You're not lifting more weight with it. It just puts your wrist in a more stable position. Did you know that if that wrist collapses when you're at the bottom of a bench and it makes you collapse at the bottom of the bench, that can irritate your shoulders? So if you're getting shoulder pain when benching, you might have a stability issue there. Maybe you need to get your wrist wrapped up. Maybe you need to do some more forearm work. You have to look at all of these factors. But a lot of it has to do with, again, rotating your movements. Rotating your movements. And you're not going to get a weaker bench just because you rotate bars and use bands or chains or board work or whatever you need to do. You're not going to get weaker at the bench if you do that for your heavy work. You're still pushing heavy. You're still straining. And if you're using all these other exercises to build the muscles up, the hypertrophy of the pecs, the delts, the triceps, why wouldn't your bench get stronger? Of course it will. But you're going to do so with a lot better shoulder health. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.